Let's go to the next slide. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about housing and housing planning and what are some strategies to work with people to get them to form a housing plan and to overcome some of the ambivalence that people have with housing. We're going to talk a little bit about trauma-informed approach because that's going to affect people's ability to take a look at a plan and to help themselves move forward and overcome some of the ambivalence. And then we're going to go through sort of a sample framework, and we're going to give you some tools to help people move forward and reinforce the concepts. And then we're going to talk a little bit about monitoring and what it looks like, because we want you to know what people are going to look at. And then we're going to talk about next steps and what else is coming up. I hope that sounds good. And then we'll go to the next slide. So let's go to the next slide. So key area in overcoming ambivalence is something that you all are really good at, and you're good at a lot of things, but this is one thing in particular. It's the need to establish a relationship with the person. So that it's, oftentimes ambivalence is overcome through a system of trust, confidence, hope. But in order to establish these things, you really have to have a relationship with people. And that a key to that is really listening to people and hearing what they want. It's perfectly fine to dream a little bit. I mean, I remember when I worked in a women's shelter, every woman I worked with wanted a house with a pool in Manhattan. Were they likely to get that? Nope, neither was I. But you know what? 700-year goals are fine because they're goals, and we could define what people want out of them in the long term, and that can help us move forward. So we want to listen to what the person is saying. We also want to really, and you guys are great at this, I've heard you describe this, we want to look at them, we want to do a full assessment, we want to look at, how they're responding to this, what their body language is saying, what they're saying verbally. And we want to start working with people on small goals. Why? Because that's the foundation of the engagement. We're engaging people within our role as case managers. So one of the things that we're going to establish is what's the process. And part of the process in working on small goals is often hearing what people want, offering people options, hearing what options they suggest, a real mutuality in the reaching the goals, even if it's like, I need to apply for SSI or I need to get a driver's license. We're going to work with them towards that. So we're going to teach them what the case manager in this relationship is. Keep in mind, most people have had not so great relationships with the case managers, and certainly not so great relationships with housing planning, because you know what? They're homeless. It hasn't worked. So we're going to teach people a new way. And so be mindful that we're teaching people a system to get the services of case management. And we're also training people to accept case management in the future. As people achieve small goals, and it can be a little, it can be, I need more water in my encampment, or I need to be able to get out to my mother's place, or anything like that, is that one of the things that you can do with people, since they work the process, is that you can help them feel some confidence, and confidence is really empowering. And if people don't feel that they're competent to accomplish things, and they have some confidence in their own abilities, they're much less likely to try things. So we want to really encourage people, take out the skills that they used, congratulate people on those skills. It's all part of the process of these really small goals. The other thing is, as we're building the relationship, we want to hear things that people really want. What do people really want? By the way, the women in the women's shelter who wanted a house in Manhattan with a pool, I don't think there is a house in Manhattan with a pool, but that's what they wanted. They told me things like, we were able to bear down on it, and they said, well, only people in real houses have their own bathroom. Actually, everybody in supportive housing has their own bathroom. So let's talk about that. Kitchen facilities, being able to have your own room. Those are the things that people wanted when they discuss this, and those are the only things that their mind is going to. So we can figure out what are the important things to people, and we're starting the process of narrowing down what they want. Okay, let's go to the next one. A big part of that is to understand people's housing and homeless history. Those are the most important things. We're going to try to get as much history as possible, and we're going to try to do as thorough as an assessment as possible, including how people react to different things, what their history is, how they use services. But we want their housing history. Where have they lived? Where they lived, what is, what's their experience as a leaseholder? Have they ever been a leaseholder? Many people have never had a lease in their life, and then they go into housing and they're expected to follow a lease, and it's completely confusing to them. We want to know what their role was in the housing. If they lived with other people, did they pay any bills? Were they responsible for anything in the house? Because we want to build on these areas of confidence. We want to know what worked for them. We want to know what didn't work for them. What did they like and what they didn't? A lot of times, I don't know about you guys, but when I talk to people about where they lived before, they'll say to me, oh, that was terrible. I never want to go back there. Okay, but you know what? This isn't really about if you're going to go back there. This is about, was there anything there that you liked that you want to replicate in the new housing? Were there things that you want to avoid? So you want to go through that stuff. Even if people didn't like their housing, they can usually find something good about it. Actually, an example that makes it really clear is if people were in the psychiatric hospital, they may have hated it, they may have wanted out, but you know what? They might have found something good about it. Even if it was like the food or a nice nurse or the fact that they made a friend, those are things that we can identify. We also want to know people's housing histories. We want to know what caused the initial episode. Remember, a lot of times the episode of becoming homeless is traumatic for people, so we want to tread lightly there. We want to let people take that at their own pace. We want to be a little careful. We want to know how long people have been homeless. We want to know the places where they've stayed and what they think of those places. We also really want to know their routine. Because, it's a big difference between being homeless and being housed, and people are going to have to make changes to their routine. So, for instance, if people are living in an encampment, they may have been busy all day long with other people, with those sorts of things. So, cooking, making sure they get food, that's going to be a big shock when they get into housing because a lot of those things will be already planned. So, what are we going to do about a routine and what their role was in an encampment? Every change involves both gain and loss, and housing is a huge gain, but it also involves loss. And one of the losses that's most profound for people is they often lose their role. So the person in the shelter who always had a little something for people who were desperate. Maybe it was a sewing needle, maybe it was an extra pair of pants, maybe it was a little sip of something. And how are they going to continue that role? Not so much with a sip of something, but with other things. So we want to talk about that. We also want to talk about who their supports are. And I think it's a fallacy that homeless people have very little supports. Oftentimes they have supports, but without resources to spare. They may have a relationship with their family, or they may not. But the family can't take them in because they're overcrowded or they have other people or, we want to know what those supports are and we want to help integrate those into the person's system of care afterwards. So this is the most important part of the assessment is the housing history and the homeless history. Okay, let's go to the next one. So we're talking about goals, right? And we're going to let people dream a little bit. And we're going to talk about what people want and we're going to discuss it, right? People are going to bring their own expertise and nobody knows a person better than that person themselves. And we're going to be aware of oftentimes, people will say things and there'll be sort of a meaning that they don't say. So let me give you an example. Sometimes people say to me, okay, what I really want to do is be sober. Okay, that's great, right? Take it with a big tune of skepticism, because sometimes people say it because they think that's what I want to hear. But then I ask them, okay, so what's going to happen if you get sober? And you hear the most amazing things. Like, my family will come back to me. I'll get my kids back. I'll be able to get a job. I'll be able to, and those are all the goals that they're thinking about, right? So it's also magical thinking. And yes, sobriety might be a step in that direction, but there are other things that people have to do too. So I don't know if you guys see this, but what happens is people might accomplish the goals they identify, but they don't get the things that they want, and then they lose motivation. I don't know if you've seen that, but it happens all the time. This isn't worth it. I haven't drank for a week and my family's still not talking to me. Okay. That's why when we talk about goals, we want to know all the goals, even the long-term goals, and be aware that this might take a while and we can set timeframes based on that. And congratulate people for beginning the goal process. We call this the so that process. You want to do this so that what? What happens, right? We want to also integrate things that affect housing stability. And we get this from our homeless history and from our housing history, right? I mean, people aren't doomed to repeat the past, but the best predictor of the future is the past. So we want to look at things that interfered with housing in the past, or interfered with them even using systems if they've been in a transitional program or been in a shelter, and see if we can start to address that either through what we talk about in the housing placement or change. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it in terms of the current crisis and the past crisis. Okay, so you've been evicted 4 times for not paying rent. Let's talk about maybe if we can make a plan so you pay rent. What do you think? And then offer them options. The other thing that we want to take a look at is the immediate and long-term goals. We want to focus on the process. The other thing that people lose motivation on is because some things take a lot longer than we expect them to. So we want to talk about how long this takes, and we want to help people sequence the process. And we want to only focus on the things that we're starting at once while connecting them to the long-term goals. And we want a predictable plan for the intervention. So you want these as clear as possible so that people can build that feeling of competence and confidence so that they can see the progress made. And we also have to remember that this will bring in their network of care and using resources. And I just saw in the chat box briefly that somebody had a resource for telehealth. That'll really help, right? So let's say somebody's long-term goal is to have a date. Okay, we can connect mental health to that. We can connect financial to that. And we can also connect housing to that. Because if you want your date to last beyond 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you best have housing, right? So we're going to talk about those sorts of things and how we're going to bring those in. Okay, let's go to the next one. So part of this is that people don't always identify the barriers. So you want to go up one. Oh, so that commercial. Okay. So you know what we'd like you to do is just here, right? We're not going to divide people up, but think about a goal that you have, okay? So if somebody asked you what your goal is or what you want, you're probably going to think in the immediate, right? Because that's what the question usually sparks. And think about what the so that principles were. Now, look, this is a work thing, so don't be overly personal. It can be stuff like, I don't know, I want to start eating healthy, or I want to take a walk every day, or I want to do something like that. But think about what the so that principles are. And if you guys are in the same room, feel free to talk to each other or feel free to bring it up. So you can unmute yourself. Does anybody have a goal? And let's talk about the so that principles. Somebody said, what do you want? What do you want? What's your goal? What would you say? Or what would your New Year's resolution be? What would your post-COVID goal be? Okay, so let me try it, all right? My post-COVID goal would be to go out to dinner. And the so that principle is I want to see my friends. I want to be safe, but I want to see my friends. So how I would put that in practice is find someplace where I could be outside, where we could socially distance, but that would accommodate 3 to 4 people so we could have the conversations that I so miss. So that's really the reason. But if somebody asked me what I want to do first when COVID's over, I would say I want to go out to dinner. But the real goal is I want to have a conversation with my friends. Think about that. So if somebody told me they want to go out to dinner, I could help them go out to dinner. But if I don't know that they really want to see their friends, then the goal wouldn't reflect what they really want. Is this making sense? Anybody have another example? Nobody? All right, let's think about something that a client might say, okay? So here's one that I react with a certain amount of skepticism. So I'll say to people, so what do you want? What do you think the goals might be? What do you want? What can we help you work towards? Goals, the word goals can be somewhat intimidating. And it was not uncommon that the clients that I worked with would say, well, I'd like to take my medication as planned and I'd like to be sober. Good goals. Why would people start considering that? What's the so that there? One so that is so the case manager stop yapping at them, right? So they want to work themselves off case management. Okay, that's not a bad goal and we can work towards that goal. Let's talk about what would mean the end of case management. What would you have to do in order to end case management? Why else would people want to do that? Think about it for a minute. A lot of times it means connection with their families. Sometimes it means a date. Sometimes it means it's easier to get money, those sorts of things. But if they don't connect it to what they really want, the so that principle, they're not going to be able to maintain the motivation. You also want to have a conversation. Is it important that you be completely sober in order to talk to your family? Or it is important that you be abstinent when you see your kids, right? I think sobriety is a good goal, but are there interim goals that we can set? It's possible to have the conversation based on what people really want. All right, let's go to the next one. So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that people have a roadmap to move forward, right? And one of the things that we want to do is people get overwhelmed and people have got to think goals are attainable and possible. That goes to confidence and competency. So we want to limit the areas of intervention and we want to explain it. Yes, we want to connect them to long-term goals, but we want to take it a step at a time. We want to focus on the most important things that affect housing. Why? Because housing is the base for all care. And as people move into housing, they can address other goals, and we want to connect housing, and you can connect housing to anything. We want to relate them to what people want long-term, and we want people to be aware that this is not a linear process. I don't know about you all, but I've never done anything in a linear process. I always manage to take a couple of steps back, a couple of steps sideways, sometimes a couple of steps straight up, right? And that we want to normalize that. And we want to reframe it. And if something doesn't work, maybe we need to try another technique. And we want to be open about that. We also want to be mindful about moving from crisis. And one of the things that crisis is very reactive, right? And it goes to, there's only one solution to the problem. You're having trouble in housing? Fine, I'll be homeless again. Okay, that's a crisis. Wait, but most of the people we worked with have been in crisis all their lives, and they don't always have the luxury to think things through. And one of the things that we can do as we start this case management process is help people think about maybe 3 options or 2 options, or it's not always have to be reactive. So that's a lot of this process. And writing it down and helping people see that different things can help them move forward will give them other choices coming up. Okay, let's go to the next one. So one of the things that we're going to use with this is something called the stages of change. And most people are familiar with the changes of stage, but we're going to assess people's motivation through the stages of change. And one of the things the stages of change taught us is it used to be, unless people want it, it's not going to happen. But you know what? There are ways that we can work with people before they get to that. So today, because of the numbers, we're going to focus on 2 stages that a lot of people are in. One is pre-contemplation. And that means that they have no awareness or interest in addressing the problem. So you want to see your kids, but it's hard for you to be abstinent when you see your kids. So the last couple of times you've been turned away. Is there something else we can do with that, right? No. It's not the drinking, it's the fact that the worker there is just evil, and you need to tell her to leave me alone. All right. Let's talk about that. We're going to ask some questions at that point. Another example, this is my favorite example of pre-contemplation. You ever said to somebody, you look like you've been drinking? And they say to you, yeah, you look like you've been drinking. We need to have something to do in that sort of situation. The next one is contemplation, where they're aware of the problem and they're considering housing or they're considering moving on, right? But they're not really ready to do it. Yeah, it's hard for me. It's hard for me to get the things I want. I really want a job, and it's hard for me to have a job if I don't have any place to stay. Okay, do you want to talk about housing? Housing's never going to happen anyway. Okay. Are there things that you would like about housing? That's what this process is helping people to move towards. Maybe I could try this. Maybe I could live with somebody. You want to go through that process with somebody. It's also about the pros and cons process. So we're going to divide people into groups. And one group is going to be, you'll be with me, so that's how we'll know the difference. It's going to talk about somebody that they work with who's in pre-contemplation and talk about what are the kinds of questions you would ask them. The other group, it's going to be with Lauren, is going to talk about contemplation, somebody who's considering housing but is going very back and forth with it. And how do you help people weigh out the pros and cons? So each group is going to have somebody who reports back, and we're going to take about 5 minutes to do this. So we're going to break people up into groups. Does that make sense? And you'll know from the group who's in what group. Okay. Here we go. 2 breakout rooms. Okay.
I'm going to unmute everyone, Andrea, so everybody can speak.
Yeah. Before you ask, no, it didn't cross my mind.
That was a bad idea.
Breakout rooms, breakout.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out where Lauren is. Oh, okay.
Hi, everybody.
We're in breakout room 1.
I think you and I are in the same room, Andrea.
I know I'm moving.
It takes a little minute for Zoom to get everybody into the room, so just bear with us 1 minute, guys. We'll be ready to start in just a second.
Okay.
Looks like I only have, the number of people in my room is dwindling, Andrea. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started with our folks that we have here. It looks like we've got about 5 of us in this room. Some more folks might join us in a minute. So our task for our group is to think about a client that we think is in the contemplation stage of stages of change, right? So that's a client that's kind of aware that there's a change that he or she may want to make, but is like kind of ambivalent, like on the fence about making the change, right? So,
what was exactly the question?
hey guys.
Hello.
How are you? Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty. So, so this is the contemplation breakout room. Andrea's not in this room, correct?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. So did you guys start already, or do you want me to help you get started?
Please.
Okay. So our task is to talk about a client that we have that's in the contemplation stage of stages of change, right? So that's somebody that you're working with that, like, you know, wants to make a change. So we could talk about, let's talk about housing, right? Somebody that, you know, wants to get housing, right? Isn't the guy that's saying, nah, I'm good, leave me alone, I'm staying here under the bridge. Somebody that's saying, yeah, I'd really like to get housing, but they're kind of like sitting on the fence. Like maybe they're not ready now, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get housing, but I'm waiting for my boyfriend's SSI check to come through, right? Or, oh yeah, whatever, I'd like a place, but I've been through this before and I know that there's no places for me, so, thanks, but no thanks. They're sort of, they want it, but they're not there yet, right? So I don't know if somebody wants to start by giving an example of someone that you're working with that kind of fits that bill.
Well, I can start. Obviously, the situation's not uncommon with many people that you've been working with. So McCall Center Behavioral Health, we do have supporting housing units and whatnot. And we're also, my guys are also on the homeless outreach team. So after some type of therapeutic relationship has been formed, then in discussing how to get them move forward, they're in conflict with themselves. They have that voice of doubt, and then they have the voice of possibilities. So it's like the devil on one side and the angel on the other. So one of the things that, at least in the beginning, I tried to really focus on the, lack of a better word, the angel side, because they're scared and they're not able to envision themselves sitting in an apartment and, when they're out there. The other aspect is that the housing system, the DEMA system, once you start to get involved in it, in order to be successful, you also have to hold them by the hand sometimes. You let them do the work, but you have to guide them. So I tried to make sure that I enhance the angel side of helping them have that vision of what the possibility is going to be, and keep on reinforcing that, enhancing it, and then present a small task for them to do towards it. So the next time I see them, they have a measurable, time-sensitive task accomplished. And then once that is established, then we can go on to the next task. And then each task that we do can enhance the vision of, and I have to promote them to like, this is going to happen. This opportunity is going to, it's going to manifest. And one of the deals here is that you have to work with us so we can manifest this together.
Yeah.
And because, like we said, they're many times they're stuck because of fear. And then, of course, they go back and forth, but, I have to stay on the positive side to help them work through that barrier.
Yeah, that's great, Glenn. I think a couple of key things that you pointed out, right, is that idea of like some of the ambivalence is about they're scared, right? And so understanding what they're scared about, right? Is it because they tried it before and it didn't work? Is it because they're afraid that they're gonna get a place and mess it up again? Like, what's that fear about, right? And then also helping them to build confidence to overcome that fear, and really partnering with them to say like, okay, you're not doing this alone. Here are the ways that I can help, or maybe asking them, what is it that I can do to help you feel more confident about this, or what is it that I can do to help you, to help you feel like this is going to be possible for you. What are there other things that people would do in a situation like the one that Glenn is describing, of somebody that's in the contemplation phase, like kind of on the fence? Other things that you guys have found that work really well with your clients?
This is Rob Lockhart here. I can say, I think for some of our folks that they've seen other people who have been homeless with them, they're be successful in housing. It's nice to kind of use that as a way to show them that it can be done, and using it as a way to keep people motivated, that we're not just talking about housing, but when we actually get some of their peers housed, they can see that it can come together, and it really opens the door for some discussion that, we can do it, but also laying it out in a realistic way that it's a process and that it will take time to do. And so I think in that, for those folks who are on that fence, they see people moving into housing, and a little light bulb starts to flicker there, thinking, they could do it. And so it's taking those moments and using that timing to really to move things forward for us. So some people take it, some people don't.
Yeah, no, that's great, Rob. I think the two things, right? So like that peer modeling. So like, because I think sometimes there can be, well, if he could do it, I could definitely do it, right? Because he's way more messed up than I am, right? So there can be that like, kind of healthy competition among folks, and also peer support. So if there's somebody that is doing it and can talk to somebody that's trying to do it, right? And then also the thing that you said about managing people's expectations, because people can, I think particularly with housing, people get frustrated when it doesn't happen quickly. Yeah. And so helping people to understand what is the realistic timeline, and if things don't happen on that timeline, helping people to understand why and what the next step is, so that they don't just get frustrated and walk away. Anything else that people like to use with folks that are in this contemplation stage?
I will make phone calls with people.
Great.
They don't want to call 211 to start the process. I will dial the phone. We sit there together. When they start to stumble over their words or don't know what to say, I can help fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
It's also company while they are sitting on hold, because, especially now during COVID, 211, the hold times are just god awful. I have 3 clients who are trying to call that new hotline for the rent relief, and they've been trying since it opened, and they still haven't been able to get through.
That's great, right? Like, because I think that, people get frustrated. And so if you can be there on the line with them just to provide companionship, right, while they're trying to do it so they don't get bored and frustrated
and hang up and walk away. And,
Yeah.
and I'll make comments about, how horrible the hold music is.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
a little,
Keep
do
it
a little
fun and funny.
just get them laughing to,
Yeah.
keep going, invite them in on the joke. And then, even if it's an hour that we're on hold,
Yeah.
when somebody does pick up, then we can start. And I will ask them along, because 211 will ask you along the way, do you want to leave a message?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the message we would leave. Do you want to leave the message now? Wait for the call back? How do you want to do this?
Great. So I don't know if everyone else saw the same pop-up message,
Yeah.
but our room's going to close in about 40 seconds. And so what I'd like is if maybe one of the people that spoke up would volunteer to be our report out person for the group. And I'm happy to help if you want it, or take it all on your own.
I can do it.
Awesome. Thank
I'll
you.
report.
All right, we're gonna close in about 10 seconds. So I'll see you guys back in the main room shortly. Just bear with, Zoom is a little slow for some reason on getting people into the breakout room. So just bear with us if you don't get back.
Questions that you asked the woman who was really reluctant to leave. Okay. Hi.
We're all back, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yep. We can hear you.
I had just talked about asking a client about what they liked about their experience in being homeless. And I have so much feedback I can. And a lot of things that she said that she liked is she didn't have to deal with other people. She only had to deal with like raccoons stealing her food. And she could have her own space, but she could also like go out into an encampment and have those other people have those personal experiences with others.
So one of the things Maria Jane said is it was a woman who was getting a lot of pressure to leave her tent. And in order to understand what it would take to help her move her tent, she asked her a lot of open-ended questions about what it was like for her in this tent. And that eventually she was able to consider housing because they could connect the things that she wanted to some of the options. So that was a great example. Yeah.
People are getting a lot of echo, so I'm gonna go ahead and re-mute everyone, and then I'll unmute, and then people can unmute themselves when they want to speak. Okay? Because everybody's back together.
So it was a great example. Latoya, do you want to say something about the person that you presented?
Sure. She's in a very stable, very stable housing. Her aunt and uncle have built an extra room on their house for her so that she has more room for the baby to grow and go around in. And she just kind of wants, she's there and she's happy and she's, consistent with being happy. Every other week that we share, though, she's in the mode of wanting to have her own place. She says, I think I'm ready now to be on my own. I think, I don't want to stay longer than I should, even though they haven't said anything to me. And you gave me some good feedback about asking, what that looks like, because I do ask her what her plan is and, have you been putting away for this moment? Are you looking for the bus line? What area have you thought about living in? Then we'll share again. We'll talk again, and she'll say, "I love it here. I really want to be with my aunt and uncle. I got the support. I got the rides to the doctor. And so I just kind of support her in whichever way she goes, because she is in a safe place with the baby and she has help. However, I do support her either which way she goes. But I did, you gave me some great feedback to ask her what that looks like, because then we can at least start working on her picture of what it looks like.
And it's possible if you ask her what it looks like that it might be accommodated where she is and it might be accommodated in an apartment. But it's hard to, in the pre-contemplation stage, they're thinking about it. And some people just hear from other people, this is the only way to get Section 8, right? And some people may want a boyfriend to move in, or maybe she's pregnant with another kid, right? So we want to know that stuff. So it's really important to really explore that in the pre-contemplation stage. So those were great examples.
Thank you.
And Andrea, since everybody's back together now, do we want to do the report outs from the two groups?
Yeah, that's what we were, yeah. That's what we started.
Oh, okay.
That was pre-contemplation.
Got it. So do you want us to do our report back from our group?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yep.
So we've got somebody from our group that's gonna do it.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
talked a little bit in our stage how like the client might focus a lot on the barriers. So what do we do to, I don't want to call 211. I'd stay on hold for too long. It's not worth the hassle. And one of the other members, I like the way he put it, was, like you have the angel on one side telling you all the good stuff, and then you have the devil on the other saying, these are all the reasons why you don't do whatever step. And try to keep the conversation focused on that, the angel side, which I thought was a great analogy. And, talked about, like, I will dial the phone and make the call with the client and sit on hold with them with 211 so they can begin the application process there. So they have company while we're doing it. I can, make jokes about the hold music or, something to keep it light, reduce the frustration so they don't just hang up and walk away. When it comes to the point where you get asked, do you want to leave a message for a call back? Help them through. What kind of a message would I leave? What would I say?
It's a great skill building technique.
What can I expect when the call back comes? And it's like, well, just like you said in your message, blah, 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 blah. That's the same thing you're going to start the, thank you for calling me back. This is what I need. What do I do next? And
it's great.
Because if they're expecting like, what feels like, the Spanish Inquisition, why would you leave a message? Why would you wait for the callback? But if I can explain the process to them and break it down to, they're going to ask you these questions, you just answer, you've got this going on, you've got that going on, you got the other going on. Keep it to like 3 simple things. Living with my mom, I'm trying to get sober, and whatever the, where do I fit in the housing thing?
It's good. So you actually gave people experience with the positive part of it and really build their confidence.
I'm trying.
Good. You have other people, Lauren?
I don't know if anybody else that talked during our group, like Glenn, wants to say anything about the case that you talked about, people being scared and how you help people to overcome that. Or I think we had 3 people in our group that talked during our group, but Jennifer was the one that was going to do that.
Yeah, I can chime in. To piggyback on what she was saying, when they have that type of ambivalence, or they do have 2 sides to them. One side is where they want to do the right thing, and the other side is, to be stuck where they are. And I just thought it was important to help them with their own vision as they're contemplating to get their own place. I want to make sure that you want to enhance that vision of them being in that apartment and the opportunity to have a roof over their head and show them what it could be like. And then the other piece is that they're scared. They've been living in the life of homelessness for a while.
Yeah.
They're leery about, because that's coming back in the real world. I mean, And we all had clients who we seen move into supportive housing. It's very hard to pull them out of the routine that they had before, where we have a person now who's moved into our supportive housing unit, and we're just starting to work towards, having them, we got him SNAP benefits, working on disability, but he still wants to go to the soup kitchen to the place where his friends are, and he still wants to go canning. And he had a routine where he'd do his canning, and then he would bring in various things of, actually it was garbage. We had the apartment nicely furnished, but he still had the behavior of looking in dumpsters and grabbing stuff out. And so when you have working with somebody, some of their homelessness has been so entrenched into their behavior, it's fearful for them to break out of it.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point, and Jennifer made the same point, is that sometimes you have to help people experience some of the positives in order to get a full list, right? Is they tend to be focused on the negatives, and you have to experience the positives. And that also builds competency. And it sounds like this guy has made a lot of progress. I know the landlord's probably driving you crazy about those damn cans, but you know what? He's come a long way.
Right. And he's been permanently housed now for—
That's a wonderful thing.
2 years.
Wow.
But this is what I'm saying. Before we're going to bring that person back to the contemplation stage, before we even got him into the apartment, the lifestyle of homelessness is so entrenched, is that that's what they know. And you have to help them with the vision of having a better situation for themselves. And the other piece that's broken down is that you have to do that in small increment, time-sensitive tasks to help them along that journey, because the vision of them going into the apartment and moving in is overwhelming of how they're going to get there. And it helps to let them know that you're going to be there every step of the way.
Absolutely.
And the next time that you meet them, you give them a task to do.
Yep.
And then either they did it or not, but at least you try to overcome the barrier why they didn't do it, or reinforce them. Hey, look at that. You just did this for us. You went down to the DSS office and you got your SNAP benefits. So then you work along incrementally and time sensitive to help them
build
on this journey.
Yeah.
And it was right before the housing system as a whole is very complicated.
Yep.
And I like what was said before, that sitting with them and helping them through that process, from the beginning of 211 to the very end, there's a lot of hoops to go through.
Yep.
So you have to help them with each stage.
It's a really important thing, is sometimes you have to go back to pre-contemplation and contemplation at every task. And that's a really important point. Let's go to the slides. Thank you, Glenn.
Welcome.
Can we go to the slides? The next thing that we wanted to talk about was, hey, Lauren, no slides are up.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay. So we want to talk to people about housing options, and you want to understand the housing options and the implications of all of them. And you should let us know if you need some help explaining rapid rehousing, what's permanent supportive housing, how about market rate rentals? Can people get into a low-income tax credit unit that provides some level of subsidy but does not provide the social services, those sorts of things? What about shared housing? What about subsidized housing such as housing authority properties? What housing authority properties are, by the way, are projects. The housing authority told us we're no longer allowed to say projects, but when we say housing authority properties, nobody knows what we mean. We want to talk about who's eligible for each, what are the choices, and that a lot of times people want something that they may not be eligible for, or there may be a huge waiting time. Yeah, you want a Section 8, we can certainly get you on the list, but that might be down the road some. So let's talk about what are the options that are available to you now. So you're negotiating this all the time. You also want to talk about people, what are the expectations in housing? And those are largely tenancy expectations. And then, as Glenn said, help them weigh the benefits and costs. And Latoya is doing the same thing with her woman right now. And that's really important. Help them. And sometimes we have to really show people the benefits or show people some of the costs. Okay, let's go to the next one. So these are some basic things that we teach people about tenancy obligations. What is quiet enjoyment? Quiet enjoyment is treating other tenants like you'd like to be treated, but it may include things like keeping the noise down after 10 o'clock, or not moving furniture at 3 o'clock in the morning, or being careful about the guests that you have in because it frightens other tenants. We need to talk to people about that. When's the rent due? What does it mean to keep a unit free of health and safety hazards? We want to explain to people exactly what that means. Sometimes people move in an apartment and Glenn's guy are going to move all their canning in, and that can be a problem. So why is that a problem? What are our other choices? That sort of thing. We talked about visitors a little bit. Criminal activity, what does that mean? Common areas, grounds, unit, and why it's important to keep your utilities paid. So we want to explain the reason, and we want to explain how this is reinforced within housing. Okay, and make a plan to follow it. You also could use Connecticut Tenants' Rights. There's a pretty good booklet on that. That helps. Some people like to have something in writing. There's also a RentWise workbook. Sometimes people can do this in groups, and even if you have people in an encampment or a shelter, you might be able to do an outdoor group that's socially distanced, but you can also do it individually, and these are great resources, and you just click on them and you can get them downloaded, and you can teach people tenants' rights. It's another way to provide this information. Okay, let's go to the next one. Most important, we want to talk housing with people, right? We want to ask them these questions all the time. Okay, so you're interested in housing. What's it going to take? What do you think the options are? Have them describe the options to you, and you can tell what people hear. What are the requirements? Okay, what's the eligibility? What are your rights? What are your responsibilities? How does it connect with the things that you want? How will this help you get back with your kids, or get a boyfriend, or increase your income? Whatever people are really interested in as a primary goal, we want to talk to them about how housing can help them and get them to talk to you about this. All right, let's go to the next one. So one of the things we need to think about is, what are the things that trauma affect? And Latoya actually talked about this a lot in our first group. One of the things that, if you want to be a trauma-informed, take a trauma-informed approach in your housing, one of the things you want to do is talk to people about safety issues. So some safety issues are generalized, but some safety issues are really specific. So I'll give you an example. We had a person who moved into housing, was going to move into housing, and this happened to be a single site apartment. And she looked at 3 apartments and she said, no, she really wasn't interested. She wanted to go back to the shelter. So we broke our own rules, showed her a couple of other apartments. No, thank you very much, dear, but I'm going back to the shelter. So finally we talked to her about, okay, so this clearly is not working for you. Can we talk about why? No, this is all very nice. I think I'd prefer the shelter. Okay. What do you think other people might have problems with? And she finally told us that she couldn't live in, these were single efficiency apartments. She couldn't live in an apartment where you could see the bed from the door. She'd had serious childhood trauma, sexual trauma, and the thought that the door would open and people could see her bed was terrifying to her. But it took a long time to get there. We want to think about that stuff. What are the personal things in safety, and what are the generalized? Trustworthiness and transparency. Actually, let's go to the next one. These are all laid out. Trust is developed over time. People have a lot of good reasons not to trust helping professionals, right? So we want to make sure that when we're developing the relationship, and remember, we are setting the tone for relationships with case managers ongoing, which they're going to need to maintain housing. So we want to make sure that we keep the promises, that we plan cooperatively, that we plan with people, that we're willing to turn around and try something else. And if somebody suggests something, even if we don't think it's going to work, if it's not dangerous, we help people pursue that. We also really want to be aware of timeframes. Those can blow trust, and that some of the timeframes aren't realistic, right? So we need to talk about those, and we need to instead plan on, okay, you should be admitted to rapid rehousing within 3 weeks. They should be in contact with you. This should be happening in 3 weeks. So if it doesn't happen, what are we going to do together? So you're working them through the process, much as you described. And we want to establish trust that people can talk about with their next case manager. So you want to talk to people all along about the kind of housing that you chose includes case management. What are the sort of things you want to work on with your case manager? I ask people all the time, what are they looking for in a case manager? So once again, it's the process that we talked about, upping people's positives about that. And if we can do that, they're much more likely to connect with the case manager in housing and much more likely to keep housing. Okay, let's go to the next one. Having peer support, that's really important. And that people often listen to each other more than they listen to us. And if you have a peer support specialist, that can be really helpful, but you can also use other people that they have interaction with, whether it's a soup kitchen, encampment, shelter. And you want to ask people, do as much as possible in small groups. And you want people to talk about options and what their individual experiences with the options are while guiding the conversation. And you want to help people problem solve. What do you think? Okay, that really didn't work, but is there anything you can think of that would have made that experience better? And how can we put that into place? Collaboration, we've been talking a lot about all along, and it helps people feel control, and that's really important, and ownership. And people who are trauma survivors are also really oftentimes felt like they were out of control and they didn't have control of their environment. That's when you see the sort of withdrawal or even some of the aggressive reactions to things. We want to make sure that people can go at their own pace and that they feel like they have some control. And that's where the mutuality does it. We also want to clarify the workers' roles because people think that the workers can do everything. Though you guys are great, we can't control everything. So that's the example about, okay, if they don't call you back in 2 weeks, what are we going to do next? And how are we going to do that together? Okay, let's go to the next one. We want people to have a voice. We want people to have choice. And that choice makes people feel empowered. Choice also includes some critical thinking, and we want people to approach things in a less reactive way because we know that if people feel like they can weigh a couple of options, it slows the process down and they're more likely to stick. So we want to help people feel choice, but also help people consider choice. And then we want to pay a lot of attention to culture, race, gender, and we want to recognize people's histories. So when we were working during the AIDS epidemic, we noticed that in African American communities, there was a lot of doubt whether people could be helped by the medications, if people should get tested. And they actually thought that this was a plot by the government. And at first I thought, what is that coming from? And then somebody told me the story of Tuskegee, which is when they didn't treat African Americans with syphilis for long term. They didn't offer them any treatment, even though treatment existed to see the long-term effects of syphilis. And that would make me feel betrayed. And, you know, a lot of times there's historical trauma. It's been passed down through the generations. You can hear about that. So there's a lot of reason that people don't trust. And we need to take them on, both by teaching skills and establishing expectations and providing support and also empathy. I mean, that Tuskegee story made me feel lack of trust incredibly. So that it's something that we want to really look at. And, you know, the other thing is if we're advocating one way to go, we've got to let people say, if they're resisting it, you want to talk about what were their own experience, what are their expectations, and what's getting in the way of this, and let people talk about it, because we learn a lot through that process. Okay, let's go to the next one. So let's look at this. I'm over, Lauren, I know, but I'm gonna go quick. Okay, so let's talk about what's a framework. Next slide. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to have a housing planning conversation with people. And what that does is all the work that you did on the positives and negatives as you're working through this, it helps people identify it. So the first sample is, you know, let's talk about location. Let's talk about access to transportation. What are the priorities for you? And where are you now? What's your current status? Let's go to the next one because it's easier to see. Thank you. So what's your current status? What's your ideal? And what would you accept? And what wouldn't you accept? So it's a long list. Yes, some people are going to check every button, but you know what? We're going to negotiate it because we want people to get priorities. Think about yourself. The last time you moved, did you get everything you wanted, your old 20 things? Probably not. We use this list to negotiate people, establish priorities, and to help people think critically about the options that they're being offered, and to look at like, okay, this one has 2 of my priorities, but 3 of my less priorities. This one has 4 of my priorities, but none of my less priorities. How do I balance these out? So it's something to look at with people. It's really a negotiating tool. And it will help also people, you can have the conversation about, okay, so this time you got 2 of your priorities, but you know what? Let's talk about where the next place you want to live is. And that helps people stabilize in housing because they have motivation to follow the housing. If they get a good rent history, they may be able to get more of their priorities. So it's a way to have a conversation. And this is available to you. Let's go to the next one. Lauren, do we want to do this breakout? Do we have time? And I know I didn't switch it. I apologize. You're on mute.
Hey, I don't know if you can hear me even when I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, we definitely have time. We have until 12:30. It's 12:04, so I think we have time. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Do you want me to set it up?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to break out into 2 sessions again. And in each of the sessions, we want one person in your group to be a client, right? So think about a client that you're working with, and to describe to your group what's that client's goals and dreams, right? Like for housing, right? So let's say, for example, the client's current situation is that maybe she's living in an encampment with her boyfriend, and she's got the boyfriend has this really long rap sheet and is maybe sometimes violent towards her. And what she really wants, though, is to live in a place near the beach with her boyfriend, and she'd also like to get a cat, right? Like, so think of a client and describe to folks where that client currently is and what that client's like dream would be for her, like, the best case scenario for the housing that she would want. And then you're gonna have the group go through and help the client, the person who's playing the client, to look at,
There we go.
Look at this tool that Andrea just went through, right? So the first column, where is she now on each of these things, like location, so she lives in a tent now, so she doesn't have a kitchen, right? Ideally, what she would like, and then what's most important to her, right? So which are the things that she's willing to negotiate on, right? Okay, I'd really like to live by the beach, but I'm willing to take an apartment that's like, I could get to the beach in 20 minutes on the bus, right? Versus which are the things that are not negotiable, right? Like, I have this cat and I'm definitely not going anywhere without the cat, okay? So so one person's playing the client, And then the rest of the group is helping the client to fill out the form, and then we'll come back together and do the same thing with a little report out from the breakout sessions. So Andrew, you can move us into that. And it'll take a little minute in Zoom for everybody to get into the breakout room. So bear with us while that happens. Oh, and there's also in your slides, the next slide is some example questions you might use. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
I'm just going to give it a minute to see if other folks are joining our room. We've got, yeah, the number's still going up. So once it looks like the number stabilizes, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I actually have a client in mind for this.
Awesome.
Mm.
All right, it looks like our number is more or less stabilized. So let's go ahead and get started. So Jennifer, I think, is volunteering. Thank you, Jennifer, to be our client. So I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer.
I have a client who was living with family, and through certain behaviors, the grandmother put her out. So she's been bouncing, couches, hotels. She let the children go. She has 2 daughters. Let the children go, stay with a relative while she figures out the housing. And in trying to talk with her about what she wants, she's absolutely terrible at communication, which is one of the first frustrations. But she did call 211. She started that process and then said they told her to go live in Asylum Hill in Hartford, that she needs to go find an apartment in Asylum Hill. I haven't been able to get any more from her than that in terms of what she wants, what she's looking for. So, any help with questions to get this conversation to actually go somewhere useful would be fabulous.
So does anyone have any suggestions? So it sounds like part of the problem that Jennifer's having is trying to get this client to just say what she wants, right? Like that you've not been able to identify sort of what we would put in the second column on the tool, which is what would be ideal for you. So does people have suggestions about approaches Jennifer might use to help this client articulate that? And has anyone ever faced this before where clients just, sometimes when people have been homeless, like they kind of have lost hope maybe. And so they don't think it's possible. And so they're not articulating what they want because they don't believe it's going to happen anyway. Has anybody ever encountered that before? I'm sure you guys have.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this client that you're working with, I was a little confused. Is the person already, as you said, called 211? Are they already assigned to, say, for your program where you are responsible for getting into permanent housing?
I have not been able to get that out of her. She seems confused about where she is. She just, in her head, they told her to go look for an apartment in this place.
So who's they? Who's they?
211.
But that's not really something 211 does, right?
I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I was confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so am I. And I can't get a better answer from her than that.
Wow.
And it's like communication with her is, it's always been kind of like pulling teeth. She's like, I don't think she pays much attention to detail. I know she's talked to people, but I can't get from her, like, did you talk to a housing authority? Did you talk to, a supportive housing case manager? Have you, and she has no answer. She talked to 211.
So
and that's all she's got.
are you able to see an HMIS or get someone that can see an HMIS who the actual contact was with like who she's actually been in touch with at 211? Is that?
Yeah, I don't have any really good contacts for that. I would love to have one if somebody has a suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk offline and maybe we can help you, figure that out. But let's just say in general, like for somebody that is in this situation, right, where, they're not able to articulate, for whatever reason, they're not able to articulate what they want, right? What are some strategies you guys use to help them to define for themselves and for you so that you can help them, what their preferences are?
Are there better ways to phrase the question so I can get some more definite answers from her? Because I can't even get, like I tried asking how many bedrooms are you looking for a 2-bedroom? And she's like, yeah, I guess. Like, well, what is it about the Asylum Hill area that, because that's what they said.
So can I ask, so what particularly is your job? So I want to find out what your role is and like, who do you work for and what's your role with her?
I am a peer support recovery navigator with the village. In terms of case management in this instance, I would be like more making sure that she follows through what she needs to follow through. So if she has an appointment, giving her whatever support she needs to actually hold that appointment. Make sure, if she's supposed to talk to somebody at 2:40, making sure she actually talks to that person at 2:40 so we can get to the next step. Trying to get the information from her so I can help get those next steps, keep that appointment, have the next conversation. Let's fill out this form. Where do we get the form? Are they mailing it to you? Do we print it off?
I got some suggestions. So do you know the agencies that are involved in your local CAN? So this will be the Hartford Coordinated Access Network?
Only vaguely.
Okay, so I think, well, with 2 separate things. One is to help yourself, help her, because I would, with your agency, find out the contacts for your local CAN, because in order for you to help her navigate the system, you actually have to be in the system to help her navigate. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. And because ours is a fairly new program, and this is something that I have been trying to do, and I'm feeling like I'm not getting very far.
Yeah. So that's, I think, a really helpful suggestion, Glenn. And Jennifer, thanks for sharing that case. And if there's anything that I can do, my email to help you get connected to the people that you need to, please reach out to me and we'll do that. I'm wondering if we might want to talk about a case here together so that we can get some practice on using the tool where we've got a little bit more information about what the person wants. So is there another case that somebody can start us off with about somebody that kind of where they are and what they're looking for, but maybe they're being completely unrealistic, because I know that that's sometimes something that happens.
Well, we're going to be breaking back into the main room in 35 seconds.
So I guess we probably don't have time.
Yeah.
All right. So,
yeah, but I guess in this case, like, is there a question I can ask that, how do I get her to look at something besides Asylum Hill? I mean, what would be a way of phrasing that?
Well, number one, you have to find out who she's talking to and the CAN when she's talking to 211. What many times a client will hear what they want to hear, and that's not exactly what was said.
So I'm really just taking notes as to the people who have been put in this situation. I'm more taking notes right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, so I think everybody's back. Do you guys want to start, Andrea, with the report back?
Sure. We didn't exactly get agreement, but I'm gonna take a leader's prerogative. So how about Maria Jane or Melissa or Latoya? You were taking notes too.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what we talked about?
Well, basically, we're talking about kind of the scenario that Lauren had gave, basically, and I was just taking notes on some of the things that could possibly come up. We're talking about pets and how they really are a huge part of people's lives, and making sure that we understand that they know that we support how important that is, because it's important, and just finding out. Make sure that we're just reassuring them that we understand how they feel, and asking about just like elevators, and it's just different things that we need to be aware of that they may be looking for, that we can't minimize. Basically, anything that they say is important for them.
Yep, absolutely. And Maria Jane had some really good ideas about how to give a place a beachy feel when it was maybe 20 minutes away from the beach. So including things like they're in the northwestern quadrant, helping people look at things like water holes and waterfalls and figuring out what meant something to people, or also decorating with a beachy feel if that made them feel calm. So that sounds really good, and that people like the idea of knowing what their priorities are and knowing what's negotiable, because you don't waste as much time going on the things that aren't priorities. Anybody else want to talk? No? How about group one?
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick report out. So we talked about a case where it was a struggle because the client really, and jump in, Jennifer, if I get anything wrong, it was her case, where the client really was not articulating much of anything, right? So the client really was saying some things that didn't quite make sense about what 211 had told them to do, and otherwise not really, not really able to articulate what they wanted. So the client was saying that 211 had said that they have to start looking for an apartment in a particular neighborhood, and that didn't really make sense to the worker that was working with her. And then, when the worker was trying to explore, what the client really wanted, what neighborhood, why that neighborhood, how many bedrooms, the client just wasn't really very forthcoming with information. And so part of what we talked about was how the worker could connect back maybe with the CAN and 211, because the client's not always necessarily a reliable reporter of the information, so that the worker could, kind of get the story straight and have a better place to start the conversation with the client, so that they could really help them to start to define what the ideal was, because they weren't even sort of able to get to, what would you be willing to accept, or what's non-negotiable for you, because they just weren't forthcoming with the information, and really trying to get at, and ultimately I think really trying to get at what that's about, right? Is it because the person doesn't feel like that, feels like this whole thing is BS, frankly, right? Like 211's not gonna help them, you're not gonna help them, I'm scared. We really didn't know in this case with the client what was going on, but clearly there was something underlying there that needed to be gotten at. And so that was sort of as far as we got in the conversation, and then we had to come back.
Yeah, but I do see the checklist that you gave in the slides. I see that being really helpful for myself to try to, even if I have to ask the same question, 5 different ways, that, it gives me something to work with to try to pin down better what this client is looking for, and especially like why this one neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't know where that ever came from, because I know 211 itself wouldn't tell her this, but also some suggestions for how to get more info for myself on
I think it's a good idea to check with 211. Sometimes my clients would tell me things like, well, the mayor said I could live in this neighborhood, or Demas said I could live in this neighborhood, or, and it's not true, but they're trying to pull in other things to get us to listen. And that's a good conversation to have with people, especially if 211 didn't say that. So maybe that's what you heard. Is that a neighborhood you really like? Is that a priority for you? That sort of thing. That's a good thing.
All right, so should we
Yeah.
move on?
Yep.
So this next slide is really just some suggestions for how you guys.
I'm sorry, Lauren, we can't see the slides.
Again, oh. Hang on a second.
There we go.
There we go.
Good.
Sorry about that, guys. So this next slide is really just some suggestions for ways that you can structure the conversation using the tool, right? So there are really three things that the tool is meant to do, right? The first one is to define for people what the person cares about most in housing, and then to prioritize that list, right? So I might say to you, okay, you know, I've got this dog, and the absolute most important thing, or you might say to you, there's like, I want to stay with my dog, and I want a condo in Florida, right? And I love to cook, and I haven't been able to do that in a long time, and I want this really great kitchen. Okay, so what's the most important thing out of those three things, right? And so the most important thing is the dog, and then like I'd really like, at least maybe I'm not going to get a condo in Florida, but maybe I'd at least like a 2-bedroom in New Haven so that my kids could visit, right? That would be second most important. And like the kitchen or Florida is something that I can wait for. So helping people to identify not only what they want, but of those things, what's the most important, and then to evaluate, okay, so like basically right now I'm living, under a bridge, right? And I've got my dog, right? But let's say maybe you're able to find 2 units, right, that are possible for this guy, 2 units that are able, someone that's willing to rent to this guy. And one of the units, the landlord's like, absolutely no way, no dog. And the other unit is like, okay, you can have the dog, but it's in a neighborhood maybe that the guy doesn't like, right? Helping them to look at each of the options, one of the options being staying under the bridge, and saying like, okay, compared to where you are now under the bridge, even though this unit is in a neighborhood that you told me you really don't like, you're going to be able to bring your dog, and you're also going to have a kitchen where you can cook, and you don't have that under the bridge, right? So really helping them be analytical about all of the options that they actually have, including staying where they are, and how each of those aligns best, which one of those aligns best with the things that they want. And then also connecting that along the way to the thing that he told you he really cares about most, which is like maybe he wants to have, really what he wants is 2 dogs, right? Okay, well, if you get this unit in New Haven and you can bring your 1 dog, and then if the landlord sees that you're good, like there's no problems with the dog, you didn't bite anyone, didn't destroy anything, right? Then maybe the landlord will let you get a 2nd dog down the road, or maybe the landlord will give you a reference and you can get a unit with a different landlord that allow the 2nd dog, right? So allowing them to see that the place where they go next isn't necessarily the place where they're going to stay forever, and that how that next step compared to staying under the bridge, where you're definitely not going to be able to like probably get a job and save money for what you really want, which is the condo in Florida. But if you go to this unit, here are all the ways that get you closer to what you told me you really want. So these are just some like a framework that you can use to structure that conversation. Okay, so we're going to switch gears now, and I'm going to talk. We've got about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to go through this really quickly, and we're going to talk more about these things the next time that we're together. So don't worry if we don't get to everything today. But when we come out and do monitoring, right, there's certain things that we're going to look for. And this one I'm about to talk about is really relevant. I know we have some people who are from other types of outreach programs, not just PATH today. So what I'm talking about now is really relevant to the PATH projects that we do monitoring for. So when we come out and do monitoring for, we're going to look for, so we talked today about engagement, right? What are we going to look for when we come out and do monitoring around engagement? So really what we're going to look for is that you've documented consistent attempts to connect with everyone that you're working with, right? So for people that are not yet enrolled in the project, that would usually just be like some kind of, spreadsheet or other tracking sheet where you're just saying, okay, saw this guy on this date in this location. But for the people that are enrolled, it's going to be a case note, right? So we want to see that that you're consistently at least trying to connect with every person that you have enrolled. So we don't want to see months go by and there's no case notes. And that's, that doesn't mean that you definitely saw them, but that, like, you went to the library because you know that that's where Joe hangs out. Even if Joe wasn't there, you put a quick note to say that you had made that attempt, right? And then also, that you are helping people to explore their options, right? So that you are giving them choices, like Andrea said, right? Because people, when they feel like they don't have choices and you're just telling them what to do, right, they're going to be more resistant and less likely to move forward, right? So that you're exploring with people what their choices are. And again, we would see that hopefully in part through the case notes. And also we have conversations with you guys while we're out, because we know that you're busy and that absolutely not everything is going to get written down in case notes. We're also going to be looking at, let me just move on to the next slide. We're also going to be looking at your service plans, right? So, and we'll talk more about this next time, but we definitely don't want to see service plans that are identical, right? So if I look at 5 charts and all 5 of your service plans have the exact same goals and the exact same objectives on each goal, that we're going to have a concern about. So even, I would say, although a lot of your people are going to have the goal of getting housing, of course, right? But maybe not even everyone, right? Because not everyone is probably telling you that they want to get housing. Some people are probably telling you that they want to stay under the bridge. And so for that guy that wants to stay under the bridge, the goal might not be housing initially. But even if everyone has the goal of housing, the steps that they're going to take to get there should look different for everyone, right? So we're going to see different objectives, even for all the clients, even if it's the same goal. And then lastly, motivation building, right? And this is like the kind of thing, a lot of this is very nuanced, and we don't expect you guys to be writing paragraphs long case notes. So some of this we're really not necessarily expecting to be able to see in the case notes, and we're going to get it more from talking to you. And we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? So if we don't see something that completely contradicts this in the case notes, then we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt and think that you're doing it. So an example of that might be, like, we don't want to see something in the case notes like, I told someone that they were making the wrong decision, right? We don't want to see something in the case notes like, I told them that they have only this one option, right? Because we know that those things are likely to make people more resistant and are not conducive to helping people build motivation. And then finally, we want to see that you are participating in your CAN, and we see that in part through the outreach plans that you guys submit, because we can see you're attending CAN meetings, and in part in the conversations that we're having with you. And then if you're doing something like, presenting a client and advocating on their behalf to get them connected, to the housing that they need in the CAN, just make a quick case note about that so that we know that that's happening. I'm going to move us quickly through these next couple slides because we're out of time. So these are tools we've presented. We've had them before in the slides, and we'll have them again next week. They're available on the CT BOSS website. These are primarily for PATH programs, but also for some other outreach programs. You're welcome to, the site's public, so anybody's welcome to access them. And then these are our next 2 upcoming webinars on July 30th. We're going to be talking more about person-centered planning and motivation building. And then on August 6th, we're going to be talking about helping people to create the expectations for once they move into housing. So that's it for today. I'm sorry, we're 1 minute over. We apologize for that. It was great to have you guys today, and we wish you a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.